He was never supposed to be this big. Not the preacher who could fill stadiums. Not the man powerful enough to move presidents. Not the voice millions cling to when life feels too heavy to lift alone. And certainly not the man handing the keys of America's largest church to the daughter the world once whispered about. The girl who became a mother at 14. But here we are. And the truth is, the story you think you know about T.D. Jakes barely scratches the surface. Because beneath the headlines, the billion-dollar deals, the rumors, the lawsuits, the collapse on live TV, lies a life carved out of hardship so deep, it remade him molecule by molecule. And once you hear where he came from, you'll understand why he refuses to break now. He was born Thomas Dexter Jakes in 1957, in a neighborhood where opportunity didn't visit. His father ran a small janitorial business, the kind of work no one applauds, but everybody depends on. His mother taught school. They worked until their backs remembered every bill that needed paying. Their house wasn't big, but their expectations of him were. And even as a boy, something about him burned different. He had a lisp so heavy it tangled his words, made people smirk, made kids imitate him in that cruel way children can. But even then, he'd stand in the backyard, preaching to the trees, to stuffed animals, to the wind. The other kids called him Bible Boy. He didn't mind. Somewhere deep inside, he already knew destiny rarely starts pretty. Then came the moment that changes a boy forever. He was just 10 when his father's kidneys began to fail. This wasn't the kind of illness a child could understand. It was the kind that rearranges a family. Money vanished into medicine. Silence settled into the walls. The man who'd stood tall for so long began shrinking in front of him. Thomas helped his mother care for him, helped his siblings, helped keep the family afloat. These weren't chores, they were lifelines. 3 years later, his father died. 16 years old and already carrying a grief most grown men never speak of. School slipped. Work became survival. He took whatever job he could. Some days there was food. Some days there wasn't. But through all of it, he kept preaching. Not for applause. He didn't have an audience. Not for money. He didn't have any. And then heartbreak again. 6 months into their marriage, a car accident tore through their world. Sarita's legs were crushed. Doctors weren't sure she'd walk again. But he refused to leave her side. Day after day, he held her up, helped her stand, taught her to walk again. Their love hardened into something steel strong because it had to. Pain gave them a covenant few ever experience. Through the 80s, he preached in tiny, cold churches across West Virginia. People didn't join because the church was beautiful. They joined because he was. There was something in his voice, a weight, a truth, that only comes from someone who's actually walked through the fire. Then came the radio. A 30-minute slot he couldn't afford, but bought anyway. His sermons filled the lonely places in people's lives. His audience grew, first hundreds, then thousands, then television, then conferences. And yet, the climb wasn't smooth. He buried dreams. He buried self-doubt. He buried humiliation. And still, he rose. When he moved to Dallas in 1996 with 50 families and barely enough money to start over, people whispered that it was reckless. But he looked at a barren plot and saw a sanctuary rising from the dust. The Potter's House opened its doors, and over 2,000 people walked in on the very first day. Within 4 years, the church was debt-free. Within 10, it was one of the largest churches on the continent. Men came, women came, families came, the broken came. Unbelievers came. And they didn't come for dogma. They came for honesty. The honesty of a man who never pretended life was gentle. And life still wasn't gentle. Katrina hit. He went to Louisiana with President Bush to help pick up the pieces of a destroyed city. Years later, when Barack Obama became president, T.D. Jakes joined him for private prayer on Inauguration Day. The poor boy from West Virginia had become a spiritual father to 2 American presidents. His books sold 20 million copies. His films filled theaters. TDJ Enterprises generated hundreds of millions. He built housing, launched schools, opened economic programs, not to show wealth, but to rewrite the story for people who lived where he once lived. Then, 2023 arrived with a different kind of storm. Sarah, the daughter who had become a mother at 14, the girl who cried in the dark because she thought her mistakes defined her, had become one of the most powerful women preachers in America. Her sister Cora battled fertility struggles with grace. His children grew into leaders, thinkers, survivors in their own right. And then came the controversy no pastor can outrun. In 2024, Diddy's lawsuit exploded. Jakes wasn't accused of anything, not one shred of wrongdoing, but his name appeared in the documents. It didn't need to be true to be devastating. The internet ran wild. People connected dots that didn't exist. Rumors spread like wildfire, because that's what the internet does. And when you're as big as Jakes, your shadow becomes everyone's canvas. Then a man from the 80s resurfaced with accusations. A man with a long criminal history, twice convicted. He demanded $6 million, or threatened to sue. Jakes refused to pay a lie. And so, he sued back. Not quietly, not secretly, but publicly, with every ounce of legal strength he had. He was tired of being a target. Tired of people trying to tie his name to their downfall. And then came the moment none of his enemies could have prepared him for. On November 24th, 2024, while preaching to thousands, he suddenly trembled. His hand dropped the microphone. He sank onto a stool, and then collapsed. The live stream caught everything. Panic erupted. People screamed. Ushers ran. Paramedics rushed in. Behind the scenes, doctors told him the truth. He was 5 minutes from death. Half his heart had shut down, and the only reason he survived was because adrenaline had kept pumping his body long enough to reach help. He later said he felt himself leave his body, hovering, drifting toward a peace he had never felt before. "I was on my way out," he whispered. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid. But life wasn't done with him yet. After months of recovery, months of quiet reflection, months of realizing his heart could not keep carrying a 50,000-soul ministry alone, he made a decision that sent shockwaves through the Christian world. On April 27, 2025, he stood before his congregation with his voice trembling, and he handed over America's biggest church to the daughter the world underestimated, Sarah Jakes Roberts, the girl they once whispered about, the girl people mocked as a teen mother, the girl who rebuilt her entire life with her bare hands, the girl who could preach hope into bones that forgot they were strong. She and her husband, Toure, became the new senior pastors of the Potter's House. Jakes didn't step down because of scandal. He didn't step down because of weakness. He stepped down because he almost died and lived long enough to see his daughter rise. He called it not a departure, but a rebirth. And maybe that's the message buried inside this entire story. That life is not measured by the blows we take, but by what we build after the dust settles. That success is not the absence of pain. It's the refusal to surrender to it. And that sometimes, the most powerful legacy a man can leave is not the empire he built, but the people he raised strong enough to carry it. This isn't the end of T.D. Jakes. This is the moment he finally breathes and watches the next generation run.